Hello, everyone. This is Elonzo. Want to know how to get your first cloud job? Then please register for our webinar. We'll teach you everything that you need to know and answer your questions along the way. Hope to see you there. Hello, everyone. This is Elonzo. Want to know how to get your first cloud job? Then please register for our webinar. We'll teach you everything that you need to know and answer your questions along the way. Hope to see you there.
My name is Richard Furr, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
So, I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired.
Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Gibbs. I'm the founder and CEO of Go Cloud Careers, and I'm here with Mark Milovanovic. He's our Chief Technology Officer and a networking expert. We're here today to help you build your cloud computing career. Maybe your goal is to become a cloud architect and you don't know where to begin. Or your goal is to be a cloud engineer and you don't know where to begin. Or your goal is to be a network architect or a generative AI architect. That's why we're here, to help you build your career. We come online completely free at least one time per week. And I do this because I want you to know how to build your career. When I started my career 25 years ago, well, almost 30 years ago now, I made a lot of mistakes. I took a bunch of boot camps and they taught me everything other than the things the manager cared about. And only when I figured out what the hiring manager cared about, I got hired. Now, I've spent more than 2 decades helping people just like you. My graduates work at Apple and Amazon and Cisco and IBM and Microsoft and Google, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, Price Waterhouse Coopers, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Palo Alto Systems, Zscaler, you name it. If there's an elite technology organization, people I've trained to work there. But the whole point of being here is so that you can ask your questions so you don't have to make mistakes and that you can go down the right path. So let me talk about a few things before we begin. We have a completely free how to get your first cloud architect job guide that you can download right now. It's a book that will explain everything to you. And yes, I have no idea why Apple does all these AI things to my system. So there is that. So generative AI thing. So we have a guide to help you get your job. It'll list the entire skills, everything you need to know. Now, the next thing that we can think of that's out there that we've got is we've got a free webinar tomorrow. We'll go over the role, what hiring managers want, how to skip those pesky HR managers, and really go out there and do it. And of course, it's our 3rd anniversary. We got 8 people hired in the last 7 days, and we have a 50% off anniversary sale off of everything we have site-wide. So you want to become a cloud architect, enterprise architect, you want to increase your leadership, your communication, your presentation skills, come talk to us, come join us, and we're happy. So Mark is going to join us and answer your questions. Mark is our Chief Technology Officer. Mark is a CCIE like me, a Cisco certified internet expert. He is a techie guru, and he's going to join us for about an hour today. So if you want to get down and dirty and geeky about your career, Mark will happily get there. You want to talk about the leadership, the executive side of your career, I'm happy to get you there as well.
So that basically means for everybody, don't be shy. Ask your questions. If you have comments, could be about technology, could be about your career in general. I know when I started off, I wish we had mediums that were as popular as YouTube, LinkedIn, and so forth, where we could get information to begin with, just so we can sift through it, see that if it's authoritative, if it's going to help us in our careers. Unfortunately, I didn't have that. And like Mike, we had to make a lot of mistakes along the way to get where we are. So take advantage that we're here, and we're going to do our very best to try to answer your questions and see if we can get you on the right path towards the goals that you have.
Exactly. So Tyrone will bring in our questions, and that's the key. You can learn by making mistakes and waste years of effort and money, or you can learn from the mistakes of others and not make them yourself and take a much straighter path to success. So Tyrone, please bring us in the questions. We've got a few. Don't be shy when asking the questions.
So first question is from CryptoYo. What's the difference between the Enterprise Architect Development Program and the Cloud Architect Career Development Program? Seems like the Enterprise includes everything plus more.
So CryptoYo, the answer to your question is yes, it does include everything in the Cloud Architect Program and more, but let me define why. Let me talk about the differences between the roles. The Enterprise Architect is a pie-in-the-sky executive position where pretty much what you're doing is aligning the organization's people, processes, and technology. And by doing so, you're looking at the corporate strategy and the vision. You're looking at how that organization operates, its operations. How does sales occur, for example? How does the customer product be made? How does the supply chain operate? How is tech support provided? And you're going to look at those processes and figure out, are they optimal? Are they non-optimal? And how do you help that company re-architect it? And then you're going to look at the organization's technology selections and figure out, what do they have? Is it optimal or not optimal? And how can they get to those desired business processes and business goals? And then typically the enterprise architect is responsible for determining a governance strategy with the organization, building the team that will deploy it, because we architects don't touch anything. You know, we design it, present it, sell it, and then we're gone. So that's the enterprise architect. Now, enterprise architecture is a really high-end executive position, and there's very little technology in there. In fact, when I speak to most enterprise architects, they're very weak on technology. And, you know, I've been an architect forever. I've been every kind of architect you can think of, from a business architect to a network architect to an enterprise architect, you name it. But here's the key. I feel like you should have some technology knowledge. So we actually, with our enterprise architect program, include the cloud architect program and then add the enterprise architect work. And here's why we do that. I hate to see an enterprise architect not understand cloud computing, not understand a hybrid cloud, not understand a private cloud, not understand multi-cloud, because if they don't understand it, they're going to struggle. And then they're going to need to rely heavier on all the other architects in the team to support them. And because in my experience working with most enterprise architects, they're so far removed from the technology and they struggle, we decided to put the two of them together. And that way the enterprise architect knows how to work with all the systems. Because what do we cover in our cloud architect program? Everything. Because today's world, everything is cloud. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to go to the public cloud. Just as much stuff is going off the cloud as going onto the cloud, which is great for cloud architects. We don't care if we build them a Nutanix cloud or an OpenStack cloud in their data center. If we build them an AWS and an Azure cloud and Oracle cloud, we don't care. We're going to use it all. So for enterprise architects and cloud architects, pretty much everything is cloud. But the data center is the cloud. And all cloud computing really is renting space in somebody else's data center. That's it.
Yeah, I would also add this, Mike, just briefly, just to interject, and then I'll let you go. Many people forget, just because you almost are out of the technology with both feet when you think about an enterprise architect, it doesn't mean you're never, ever going to interact with any group outside of the C-suite. So I always like to think of it that you're going to have to know some type of language on how to communicate with the people that eventually you're going to interact with. If you don't know how to communicate with them, then what good are you going to be to those people?
Exactly.
So you still need to be able to somehow translate between the different domains, even though you might be spending more time on the executive side, the business, than the actual technology side.
And that's exactly the case. In all architect roles, we're really a liaison between the executives that actually know what the business is and their goals, and actually the engineers that are going to go build this stuff. Because in most architecture positions, you're never going to be allowed to touch the technology. So that's the enterprise architect. Now, the cloud architect program is basically how to become a cloud architect. And that involves, learning how to obtain customer requirements, learning how to give a great presentation, learning how to give good leadership skills, improving your executive presence, because if you're going to communicate without presence, nobody's going to listen to you or take you seriously. It involves building the business cases. It involves the architecture, the network, the data center, the cloud, all of it. So yes, they are very similar. In the enterprise architect program, we have the entire cloud architect program, plus all those extra enterprisey architect things like mapping out business processes, for example, or re-architecting business processes, or re-architecting and mapping out the organization. And that way they get the best of both worlds. Because I hate to see an enterprise architect that doesn't understand the tech. No, we don't ever expect any architects to touch the technology, but you have to understand how it works. If you don't understand how it works, how are you going to design it? And that's the big difference between the person that flies the airplane, which is a pilot, versus the airplane designer, who is an aeronautical architect, which is different. And that's why, the knowledge to do something versus the knowledge to design something are different. And that's why we do it. So we supercharge our enterprise architect program with extra cloud and network and security architecture work, because we want our enterprise architects to not only be the best, and sure, we go deep. We have 3 MBAs in our program teaching into both architect programs. We have 2 PhD business school professors coming in here. We've got someone with a master's degree in law. We've got multiple CCIEs in here to really talk about networking and really good security people. And that's why we do it. So Crypto, I hope I answered your question. Yes, the Enterprise Architect program is the Cloud Architect program, and then special other Enterprise Architect questions. Please ask us your questions. Don't be shy, and then we'll get into the rest of your questions.
2NQ asks, states, happy anniversary, Go Cloud. Thank you very much for that. Keep up the great work. How should one go about figuring out what type of role in cloud tech they might like if they're completely new? Good question.
Well, that's a good question. You have to know you. Know thyself. And I really want you to figure out who you are, what your likes are, what your dislikes are, and your goals. 2 Hughes, I went to school for 7 years and learned internal medicine. And then I decided I was going to go to networking. I did. So it's better if you don't spend 7 years and get a 6-figure education only to do something in a completely different career. But, so that's why I say this. So first I'd say know what you like. And then let me break it down into you between an architect and an engineer. And then we can break it down into various domains. Because if you know what you're dealing with, then you know what you're dealing with. So we basically have a few kinds of roles in technology. One is sales, pure sales. Salespeople sell the product. They don't typically know how the product works, but they know how to sell the product. They're business executives, they're well paid, and it's a great job. The next thing we have is the architect. The architect is the designer. This is not a hands-on position. So when a company asks me, how can I help them operate more efficiently? That's my architecture job. And that job is about asking the executives about their business goals, their business pain points, their business challenges, figuring out how they operate today, how they want to operate in the future. Then it's about examining their technology systems. Then in Hughes, it's about building a team and leading a team of subject matter experts to kind of help you design it, because you're not going to design these architectures on your own. Then it's about documenting that architecture, presenting that architecture, and selling that architecture. Now, there's a lot of client entertainment there, a lot of steak and scotch and wine drinking, a lot of golf, a lot of go to dinner, but that's the role. So that's the architect role. Here's the thing, we don't touch the tech. You're not going to get bored sitting behind the desk all day long, because it's going to be different every single day. Then we have the engineering side of careers. This is the builders. These are the techies of the world that like to get geeky all day long. And that's fine, because we need them. These are the people that take those architects' designs and they build them. So kind of the same way you have an architect design a building and then you have a construction crew build it, that's your engineers. And those engineers need to be deeply analytical. They're going to have to be behind the desk pretty much all the time, because they're going to be thinking and calculating and determining and planning. And for people that like that, it's great. This is a behind-the-scenes job. Behind-the-scenes job, typically speaking, have much less career potential because nobody sees the value that you're doing. But some people love sitting behind a desk. Some people love working on their systems. This is a job where you're giving less presentations, less sales, less meetings. So there's a lot of people I know that this is their dream job. I've got a friend, Moses, who's been an engineer now for the last 30 years. He's great. He's over there in San Francisco. I've tried to convince him to take some bigger architect jobs that I even had for him at a company I was working at, but he loved it. He loves that stuff. But if you walk in his house, he's changing the lights with his phone. You knock on this door and there's a TV screen that lights up in his house. That's him. He loves it. That's your engineering type. And for those people, God bless them, because we need them. Because if we don't have them, nothing's going to work. And then, we also have the program manager side. So let's say I design an architecture. I do it all the time. Somebody's going to have to make sure that the people that are building it actually do what they're supposed to be doing, and they're doing it in the right order. For example, if we don't have the network up, and then you want to put your applications up, they're not going to work. And that's called the critical path in program management or project management. So that's kind of what those are. Now, in Hughes, I just listed a whole bunch of different career options. Of course, there are also, and obviously software engineers or they fall under the engineering. So that's why I've done that. Now, let's talk about the domains you can work in. Well, you can work in networking, place that I love, near and dear to Mark's heart and my heart. And I see Mohammed's here from Somalia as well. Good to see you, Mohammed. He's in the networking space. We basically make the connectivity work. Without the connectivity, there's nothing there. Of course, there's security, right? You can protect systems. And when it goes to security, you can be a security designer, like the architect. You can be the security engineer, like the builder. Or you could be the ethical hacker, which is somebody that's paid to hack into systems. If that's interesting to you, you got to see that. Now, of course, artificial intelligence, right? You can design AI systems as an AI architect, or you can build AI systems as an AI engineer, but that's a new domain. Big data, too. That's another domain. Data in today's world is an asset. So if you're someone that loves looking at data architectures and data lakes and extraction, translation, and loading and how that can be done, and mapping and reduction can be done, and normalizing data and mining data, well, there's jobs in that data world for you, too. So there's a lot of opportunities. So, in Hughes, what do you like? What makes you happy? What's going to make you excited to wake up every single morning? That is the question I want you to ask. And now that I've given you some few options, maybe ask me a second question about those options. I really want to help you, but you got to know yourself, because you don't want to be like me. You don't want to go to school for 7 years, have a $100,000 education and say, I enjoy my job, but I love networking so much, and then have to change careers. Mark, you have any guidance for that? And please ask questions if you guys have them.
I would definitely start off with your predisposition. I always say that if you genuinely dislike, even in the good and the bad times, dealing with people, going in any kind of design role or any kind of sales role is going to make you be miserable. So don't do that. Rather go into a role where you're going to be interacting more with the zeros and the ones, which is going to be the systems themselves, the technology systems, and find a niche in there. We always say this, make sure that your fundamentals when it comes to your actual soft skills, your emotional intelligence skills, your communications, your writing skills, that they're at a good foundation, and then specialize in something. Don't be a jack of all trades. I know that that's what they show in all these job applications, but the reality is they're never ever going to find a person like that because they don't exist. And if they existed, guess what? They wouldn't be working for them. So that doesn't make any sense there. So find something that you're good at and then supplement the rest, supplement that specialty with the rest of the skills. And then I would give you a more pragmatic approach. When we have students enroll in the program, many of them also don't know what they're going to do. They have no idea. You know, it's like a kid in a candy store. There's so much you don't know. So either it is going to be maybe trying out a few things, seeing what they're like, seeing if they catch your attention or not. If you say you read something about a particular domain, for example, for me, telephony, I think I read about 2-3 paragraphs and I never opened a book again about telephony. It just didn't really strike a role, which is kind of odd considering I worked before for a managed service provider whose primary domain was telephony, which was, that was a bit funny there, but it just didn't strike a chord with me. Networking was a lot more appealing to me. It was, how do you make all that plumbing work? Because everything else runs on top of the network. So that might be appealing to some. Then there's those that might say, you know what? I really enjoy getting my hands dirty. I enjoy building it. And they become these ridiculously talented cable wreckers. I mean, they'll do cabling like you've never seen. It's like art for them, and they excel at that. So you may have to go and learn a little bit. And I really mean this, just a little bit. Think of it like a summary of a book of what is entailed in security, what is entailed in networking, what is entailed if I was to maybe have a less technical role, like what is architecture about? How does architecture relate to cloud environments, to network environments, security environments, and then see what really appeals to you. So you may have to do a little bit of a sampler, unfortunately. Just don't overdose like a kid in a candy store. That would be my recommendation.
And until you know to and use, keep it generic. Do you know what you're going to need for all these jobs? Good communication skills.
Yep.
If you have good levels of emotional intelligence, you'll get hired and earn more in both. If you've got good presentation skills, you'll earn more. If you've got the ability to ask the right questions and obtain information, you'll get there. These are the kind of things that I call, options. And those are some of the things that I absolutely love.
Yeah, I would also add is in any job, it doesn't mean if it's technology or not, you're going to need to be good at talking to people, or at least being able to convey your thoughts. And you're going to have some form of organizational skills. So if you're really not sure of what type of technology or role you want to do, always focus on that first. Because believe it or not, it's going to make everything else 1,000 times easier for you. It sounds counterintuitive, but it really will do it. Because once you get involved in the tech and you start diving deep, adding the other skills to it retroactively becomes a chore, becomes really difficult because you're so involved in the minutiae detail of what you're trying to understand when it comes to the tech that you may not be even able to communicate some of these thoughts. Like Mike, of course, has had practice for many, many years, but we still find ourselves sometimes having to give it a second thought on how would we really communicate this technical topic in a way that it would make sense beyond just how I internalized it to me. So work on the non-technical skills in the meantime until you find something that really resonates with you. Great question. Question from Varun. Suggest some resources on how to build strong communication skills, both written and oral, which are essential components for being an enterprise architect.
Absolutely, Varun. And at the levels that we're talking about, it's about coaching. At low levels out there, there's some AI things that actually are there, but they're not going to work for a big role like this. Here, it's about coaching. So At the low level, when people get started, in their engineering world, I like to send them to Toastmasters if they don't have the option to training or they don't have the money, because it's free and it's better than some of the options that are there. Once you actually get into an architect job, you're going to need to be coached or even training to be an architect. Now, there's an organization called Speakeasy in California that was really good. I've done some training there. I've also had an executive coach with me to work for decades to help me build my executive presence and the presentation skills. This is a lifelong thing. In addition to that, Jerry Weissman is out there and he does a lot of good work, but we do a tremendous amount of coaching and presentation skills coaching because it needs to be there. This is a human to human because, here, look, watch. Hi, my name's Mike Gibbs. Now I'm speaking in a monotonous form. Hi, my name's Mike Gibbs. Now I'm not monotonous, but I'm stiff. Hi, I'm Mike Gibbs. I'm an architect with 25 years experience. Now I've actually added pauses, varied my vocal tone, and used more time and space. And that's why this is really a human to human to human thing. And this is why we teach this. Same thing with executive writing. I did an MBA. And after the MBA, I realized I didn't know executive writing. And I hired an executive writing coach. And the company did for me. And this is here. And you can feel the difference. If you look at AI writing, like I go to LinkedIn every single day and it horrifies me. I want to know where all the humans are. And I look at all this icky, verbose nonsense that was spit out via AI. And then I look at an executive that's been trained to be an executive and I notice how they write. And there's a big, big, big difference. So again, this is coaching. I got to tell you, I did almost 3 master's degrees. I did a master's in healthcare. I did an MBA, and I did 80% of an MBA at Drexel University, which would have been my second MBA. And that was all about writing and writing in complex, verbose language and scientific citations, etc. And then I finally finished my MBA program. I joined an elite consulting organization, and then they taught me how to write. So again, this is training. This is one-on-one guidance. This is one-on-one mentoring. There's just no other way around it. I see people send me these AI resumes every day, and I'm like, and I'm polite about it. I'm like, throw away the resume and start doing it from scratch. So that's really some of the things. But there's good courses that are out there that are really there that can really help people. Unfortunately, these are not cheap courses. If you go to a good speech course, it's going to be $3,000 to $5,000 for the week, and somebody's going to really need a few of them. And that's one of the reasons we have so much of this in our training program, and we do it, and we have all of our coaches because we know most people can't afford it. Now, once people get jobs and get hired, they're going to be there. I was thinking at my conference, and we had Jordan Kittico. This conference, last conference, we had Ivan Tamba. And both of these were young men, fine young men. They're both Cameroonian. And they both came to America when they were about 15 years old. In fact, they were friends. And I watched them both speak. Last time I was blown away by Ivan, and to this time I was blown away by Jordan. The way they spoke, the amount of space they knew how to take up, the gestures used, the pauses, the variation of the vocal tone, how they looked at the audience in the eye. It was just so special. So totally impressive for me. And anybody can learn these skills. Look, I was shy. I was the most shy kid you've ever met in your entire life. I know it sounds hard to believe, but I was really shy. In fact, one day we had one of the VPs over at NVIDIA, my good friend Alvin DaCosta. He used to be my manager. And he actually came on our show and he says, Mike's an introvert, right? And everybody on the team was like, are you kidding me? But that's the key. We can all there, but it's training. And this is about person-to-person training. This is about coaching. And this is all about having someone else look at us, analyze how we make them feel. It's about alignment with our body language and our words and our posture. And it's about authenticity. So there are some good resources that are out there that can really help you build your communication skills. Any ideas here, Mark, you want to add?
I just had a thought. When you said that you were an introvert, I always find it funny that most people that get on camera, that start having a type of following, that put themselves out there, they're always introverts. I mean, even I consider myself an introvert, but you would never know talking to me. So it really comes to the point, you can teach yourself these things. But to answer Varun's question, let's go a little bit more, let's be a little bit more pragmatic here. Let's have some practicality to this. If you want to be good at both communication skills, written and oral, you have to practice it.
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, you need to start with the actual act. I generally recommend doing this. Read. Every day, read. If you can read something that perhaps you're learning, that will be even better. And then hopefully the author is a decent writer. So let's make the assumption that they are. Read the documentation, read the books. Then do this. Get a pen or pencil or paper, and then start writing. Write down your thoughts about what you just read in your own words. Try to formulate it. Just practice it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but make sure that it's a sentence, it forms a thought, an idea, just like what you read. And do this every day, maybe for 15, 20 minutes. And if you want to improve your communication skill, then is take what you just have written down, what you have read, turn on your cell phone or turn on your camera and take 5 minutes and start talking. If you have no one that's willing to listen to you, and maybe it's technology, maybe nobody wants to, do that. Do that every day. You'll be surprised in 30 days what type of improvement you're going to make. And this does not cost you getting books. This does not cost you getting a course or anything. Now, granted, I'm biased. I'm going to tell you there's a plethora of information out there. You want sales training, there's probably 1,000 books, 1,000 courses. You want communication training, same thing, probably millions. So I always would say is we have a package. Within that package, it's condensed to get you to the job that is going to be enterprise architecture or cloud architecture. So that's what it's tailored to, but it's going to get you those skills. But let's say that's not necessarily your intent right now for whatever reason. Try those exercises. And you can do this with pretty much any type of literature that you want to. It could be fictional, non-fictional, could be technical, but apply that for 30 days. And then let us know if you saw any improvements. Welcome back, Mohammed.
Always good to see you. In an architecting role, do you need to have information on the tech to drive into their business requirements? So Mark, Mohammed, it's a good question. First, I'm going to be an executive architect, and then I'm going to be an architect that's got a technical background. And watch how I do it. So Mohammed, here's what I really want you to understand. If I'm working in an enterprise project, and I have to manage stakeholders, and I've got to go manage a team of expert architects and engineers and build a plan. And I've got to find the company's vision, and I got to figure out the, the business processes, how that business operates today. And I've got to go to talk to department heads and frontline workers, and I've got to manage these. I can't get too techie. So if it's a small architecture, and I might be able to do it myself. If it's small, meaning small, like nothing that they would ever hire a cloud architect or an enterprise architect work for. Why? Because the only people that are going to hire us architects are big businesses. So now I'm going to be an executive architect. I'm not going to know much about technology at all, specifically networking. And I'm going to ask Mark a simple question. Mark, my customer's an internet service provider. What are my 2 interior gateway routing protocols I could choose, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of each?
You would have the choice between ISIS and OSPF. Strength of both of them, actually, that they're open vendor in a sense, meaning that you can have different vendor equipment. It could be Cisco's equipment, Juniper, Arista, Brocade, whatever you want. You can run that particular routing protocol on both of them. So that is great about them. There are weaknesses, though, to both, even though they're very similar. One of them is that ISIS, even though it's a fantastic routing protocol, is not very well known by most of your engineers. That's an unfortunate thing. So from a business perspective and operational capacity, OSPF would be a better choice in that case for your actual internal network.
Mark, that's great. Thank you. Now, Mohammed, I'm a CCIE, and I know the difference between OSPF and ISIS. But now I'm leading a $500 million architecture, which is nothing for the kind of work I do. Mark, I've got an internet service provider, and I need an interior gateway protocol. Could you tell me, what my options are and, the strengths and weaknesses of each? Mark's going to give me the same answer. Mark's going to give me the same answer, Mohammed. And here's why I put you through this. If you're truly the architect and you dive too deep into the technology, you lose focus on what really matters, which is the business. And here's the danger, and I like to use this as an example, but you know, but I almost got fired from my first architect job 25 years ago. And here's the reason why. I happened to be at a client. I designed a new solution for a client. It worked great. And they had me there to talk about the new project. And while I was there in a meeting, they had an outage, and I logged into their routers and saw a BGP misconfiguration, and I fixed it. And my manager was like, "You touched the technology." He said, "Do that again, you're fired." He said, "I can't have you losing focus on the business." So it always comes back to this, you know, and I always use these two photos that I took of my backyard, but I do it for a reason. If I was focused on ISIS and I had said, you know, if I'm thinking about the IGP like Mark did, and I said, okay, with OSPF, I'm going to have to run a single area if I want to use MPLS label switching. And inside that single area, you know, we're going to have a lot of LSA. So we're going to turn on tag switching or label switching. We're going to signal our tunnels with RSVP. We're going to create our primary backup and explicit paths. Do you know what I can't see or focus on anymore? The business. Now I can do it, but I have to raise myself to a higher level. So Tyrone, show this photo real quick. And so Tyrone, if you can move Muhammad, just so people can see it. We're always thrilled to have Muhammad here. So here you can see a squirrel in my backyard. And if I'm zoomed into the squirrel, as if I was zoomed into that networking, like that last answer I gave you, all I could see is the squirrel. Now, what's the danger in architecture? Architecture is big picture. And what do I mean by big picture? You have to understand the business processes, the customers, the sales, the marketing, everything. And if you see what's in front of you, you miss the big picture. Now, this goes back to exactly, Tyrone, please share the next one. Here's what was really happening on my backyard. See that beautiful little girl with the pointy little ears and the tail and the spots on her? That's my cat, Cindy. She's the second love of my life after my wife. But Cindy likes to eat squirrels. And Cindy was there mesmerized looking at those squirrels, figuring out how to have squirrel dinner. And if I was focused only on the squirrel and I didn't take that high level big picture, guess what? I wouldn't see the cat trying to do the squirrel. And that's why architects can never get too deep into the tech. And that because the second they do, there's an actual disaster. And guess what? 70% of architecture projects are disasters. 70% of all things that companies spend money on don't work. Why is that? If they're so focused on the tech, they miss the big picture, and they're no different than that. Me looking at that cute squirrel versus me thinking that my cat Cindy is going to eat the squirrel, and I better get Cindy in the house to protect the squirrel. Hope I answered that question, Mohan. It's a great question, and you know that's where a lot of people that come from an engineering background don't understand architecture. Now, why would they? They're engineers, and they wouldn't understand architecture. And why would an architect truly understand engineers? It's somebody else's job, and we just don't know. I hope
the needs are different, right, Mike? I mean, for example, I gave you more the question in regards to people. What is going on with people? I'm trying to make it work for the business. But the engineer in me would say, well, OSPF natively does not support IPv6. Now, some people are going to tell me I'm wrong. It supports IPv6. Well, OSPF 3 supports IPv6, and you can tunnel IPv4 and IPv6. On the other side, ISIS does multi-topology routing natively, meaning I already had that extension built in. I don't need to run two different quote-unquote routing protocols in OSPF compared to ISIS. So that's one of the important things. So that would be more the engineering side of it. Yeah. And that's what you generally want to see from an engineer when they're talking to a designer or let's say an architect, maybe that they didn't take that into account. Now, if you're a network architect, they're probably going to have taken that already into account. But let's just say a general architect, they may not have looked at those particular details. They would have just given you from a business perspective what protocol would have gotten you to your goal. And then when it comes from an operations side, because you're going to be dealing with people, leading teams, how can you make them successful? Because you don't want to set them up for failure as well. So that could also be the difference. Welcome back, Simon. It says, I know that cloud architects need to understand the business and their operations. Does this relate to business development, similar to chief strategy officer?
Well, Simon, they're all different things. Here's what business development is. Sales. So let's say I work at Cisco and IBM is a partner. Business development is meeting with IBM and enabling them to better understand the Cisco product set so they can sell it. It's typically different than direct sales as I try to sell to Mark directly. Now, anybody in sales Anybody in architecture needs to understand their customer. The same way a doctor needs to understand their patient's medical condition to get them better, the architect, the business development person, or the chief strategy officer are all caring about the business. Now, for the business development officer, let's say they're working at Cisco trying to sell to IBM, they need to understand IBM's clients' needs, and the types of things and technologies that Cisco has that could enable IBM to better serve their clients. That's more tactical, but it still has some strategy in it. The architect is basically the technology chief strategy officer. That's really what they're doing. They're setting the organization's strategy on how they use technology to maximize the business. So I kind of hope that makes sense to you. So yes, these need to understand business in every aspect of business. And they need to be able to analyze business missions and business objectives. And they need to understand how to look at what the people are doing in the organization and the processes in the organization. The technology, the strategy, it is all there. You can't design what you don't understand. Same way you can't design a network architecture if you don't understand networking or have networking people with you. You can't design a cloud strategy or an enterprise architecture if you don't understand the business goals and the business's needs.
Yeah, I will probably say also at that stage, that's probably the most crucial things that you should be focusing on is how does the business actually function? It's going to be, and I'm just going to say, it's going to be impossible to make any type of recommendation, either tactical, strategic, any type of recommendation, if you have no idea of what's going on. Can't recommend anything at that point. And if you do, that's probably going to be one of the last architecture jobs you're ever going to have in your life, because it's not going to be a good use case if you just recommend something without an actual purpose to it. So definitely understand the business and the operations. And I'll add this too. Even for engineers, this would be good to do. Learn a little bit about the person that you're working for, the organization, or if you're working in a capacity of a managed service provider, or if you're working for a service provider itself, learn a little bit about how the technology is being used by the customers and why it is. And that's going to aid you a lot in becoming a better engineer. And of course, it's going to open up future possibilities too, because now your mindset is slowly going to be shifting away from just being purely technical to also adding a little bit more of the business requirements. Great question, though.
Very good. Great question.
Dingamon asks, hi, Mike, would it be appropriate to express to your manager that you desire an architect role, or should you handle it differently?
Okay, Dingelman, it's good to see you. Congratulations on the job you got very recently. It's been an honor to work with you. So since you just started a job at maybe what is the best technology company in the world right now, and the largest technology company in the world right now, I think you need to do what you're doing for a couple of months. I'd say for the next 3 to 6 months, really go out there and really wow your company. But I want you to look for every problem as an opportunity. As you do your work and you notice there's a gap in knowledge, volunteer to your manager and say, I noticed this, I'd like to write some content and do some training to others on it. Where you work, that manager is going to know it and know that organization you work for real well. It's a great one. Look for opportunities to give some presentations in front of a group. Look for opportunities to mentor more junior people. You're super smart and super capable. Then about 6 months from now, when you've proved yourself, say, you know what, I love my job, but I want to move into an architecture role. And let them know that you've had some good architecture training. And guess what? They'll definitely have it there. So yes, definitely, but just don't do it on the first day or the first week at a job. One time I hired an employee and, in about a month, they said, I really don't want to do this anymore. And why was that a problem? Well, because if we needed to keep them, I would have needed to train this person for the next 6 months to get them on board. But they didn't want the job anyway. Now, in this particular case, I really liked the person so much that I called a friend in another department and said, I think this person would be really well suited to you. He's one of my hires. And they're like, oh, one of your hires? They must be good. And I said, yeah, but he's not really happy in this role. And I think he'd be much better happy with yours. do you have a vacancy, or do you have a, what do you call it, a requisition? Do you have this? Would you be interested? And I was able to transfer that person. But yeah, but I generally don't recommend that, especially right now, Dingelman.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. If you're brand new, even just a few months, don't necessarily throw it out there. It might be taken in wrong context, like almost like you dislike the role you were just hired for. So that might not be good timing. But let's say a little bit down the stretch, start first off with reconnaissance. Try to find out, is being a architect even a possibility at that organization? Let's say there is none. Do you see ways that perhaps you can create that role? Because believe it or not, just because a company is not advertising for a specific role doesn't mean that they don't have problems that such a person can solve. You may just have to be able to demonstrate that you can solve these problems and create that role. So that's an option. Just don't do it within your first month or two. Varov says, domain knowledge like CPG and FMCG are too big to consume. Where should I concentrate making technical decisions or domain decisions? For enterprise architect, how to handle decisions where lots of knowledge is required.
Okay, Gaurav. So I'm going to agree with you and disagree with you. If you're going to be a great long-term enterprise architect, you're going to have domain knowledge. And whether it's a consumer projects group or transportation or medical, you're going to be there. But let's define our architects into domain experts versus business experts. For any of these jobs, you must be a business expert. You can't architect an organization's business and business processes if you don't understand business. So that's why in our architect program, enterprise architect program, we do so much heavy work. For people that don't, and we teach every piece of business that's necessary, and we keep the stuff out that's not. For people that are not in our enterprise architect program, we recommend they get a master's in business administration as kind of your underline, I call it like almost your undergraduate business fundamentals. Because you have to understand business. And let's look at early enterprise architects versus domain experts like me. And I'll tell you, and I've had both jobs. When somebody gets out of an MBA program and they join McKinsey or Deloitte or Accenture or KPMG or Capgemini or PricewaterhouseCoopers, they're a consultant, right? They've got their fun MBA stuff, and then they get put on consulting projects. And when we go on a consulting project, what do we look at? Business processes, right? We look at the organization's top line revenue. We look at the organization's operating expenses. We look for inefficiencies that exist. We look and see how people do their jobs, what people are doing, what they're not doing, which people we need, which people we don't need, which people we should replace and replace with what kind of people, which people we should cross-train. So that's consulting, and enterprise architecture is a consulting. Now, you can do that, and you can be good at that without being a domain expert. But now, I'm on my new project working for Bank of America. Do you know what I better do for the next 6 months? Not only learn Bank of America, I better learn the banking industry, because if I don't learn the banking industry, I am a worthless architect. If I don't understand the business and I can't shape that business, then I shouldn't be involved in designing anything for the business, because all I'm going to do is hurt the business. I kind of hope that makes sense to you. So there's that. Now, that doesn't mean you're a domain expert at that point, but it means you know a lot about it. And boy, this Apple AI, we got to disable this somehow. Mark, that's a project for you and me one day. So now let's look at that. Now how did I start my career? First thing I did is I designed systems for internet service providers. I wasn't a domain expert there. I learned. I spent years at it, and after a couple of years, I know what's an expert, somebody with 10,000 hours of experience minimum in a small domain. Then what did I do, Gaurav? I then decided designing systems for banks. And there were a lot of things from the internet service provider world that I was able to take with me for the bank. The need for 100% availability or 99.999% availability at all times. The need for critical change management, the critical for business needs, uptimes. I took a lot of it with me, and then I learned new things. And then here's where my architecture career blossomed, Gaurav, as I was hired as a domain expert. When I worked at Cisco, they decided, and they had what was called an Internet Business Solutions Group. Microsoft has their business solutions group, and all the best companies do. What are they? They are experts from an industry, meaning they've worked in the industry or they've held C-suite positions in the industry that then go consulting to other organizations to help them. So I got hired as the chief healthcare architect for Cisco in that Internet Business Solutions group. And why did they hire me and why was I special? Well, I went to school for 7 years. I had my own internal medicine practice. Before I did that, I was a nurse. And before I did that, I was a paramedic for 7 years. So now I'm a person with, a lot of education and a whole lot of years experience in an industry. So that is a domain expert, and I worked there. Now, who else worked in my team? Another physician who had an extra master's degree in medical informatics, a pharma expert from the big pharma industry, my friend Francis, who was the best management and strategy consultant I've ever met in my entire life, and a couple of other people, but they were all from that C-suite from these organizations. And that's the key. You have to have knowledge. Now, you're not going to start as a domain expert. That comes over time. I worked with internet service provider for years. I know a lot about how they operate, how to make them better. But I spent most of my life in healthcare. So that's the key. So we need a lot of knowledge. So what do we actually do most of our time as architects? Because we're never touching the technology. We probably spend 30% of our time doing research. I mean, every time I'm looking at it, if I'm got a new enterprise architecture and it's a new bank or a new hospital or this, I'm going to say, what do the analysts say what's going on with this organization? What is the C-suite saying? What is the customer sentiment about this organization? If I don't know it, I can't consult, right? And then I'm going to ask the frontline workers, the executive department heads. I'm going to learn more and I'm going to take really good notes. Then I'm going to do my research in the industry and saying, okay, if I'm working for this bank, what has this bank, or this bank done? And how did that help them? And I might even look through other case studies for other businesses from other architects I know. Well, this is in a similar but different business and they made these changes and how did that help? So about 30% of that time is going to be research, 35%. Now the rest of it is going to be team building, because I promise you, it's going to be very hard to find a healthcare architect like me, someone that can practice medicine and was a nurse and was a paramedic that also has been an architect for 30 years. It's going to be hard to find that. So I have other architects call me. Now let's be fair. Mark is an expert on software-defined networking. Software-defined networking didn't work when I started my network architect career. If I was going to be doing a project and it needed software-defined networking, I'd find somebody like a Mark. And that's going to be there. So how do you handle the decisions? This is a great question. You handle it like any other executive, because we are executives. How many times have we had a president of the United States that's never served in the military? How do they do that? Because they've got a chief of staff and they've got the joint chiefs of the military and they have generals that advise them. So in any of these big leadership positions, you're never going to know. You're never going to know as the CEO what's right or wrong. You're going to have to do the best you can with the best available decisions. When you're the enterprise architect on $1 billion plus, you're consulting to other architects and other practices and you're asking all these questions. So you're going to get the best information you can and then you're going to have to make decisions. Now, the good news is we can quantify our decisions. What is the expected value of this architecture project? And based upon, our expected value calculations, which would be, the percentage of success that we see, the degree of success in terms of financial metric savings that other businesses have achieved. And we're going to calculate for that for different opportunities. And we know the expected value of opportunity 1 and expected value of opportunity 2 and expected value of opportunity 3. Now we're in the position to be able to choose the right one and help guide the leadership to do it. So it's just like any other business executive decision. It's done on quantitative and qualitative metrics.
Yeah, and I'll add this little nugget to it. As an architect, as an enterprise architect, you're going to be leading other people as well. There's nothing wrong with leaning on the subject matter experts of these different domains. If you don't have the time to sit there for 6-7 months and actually study the differences when it comes to consumable products. So that's always an option as well. You're not in this alone. You never were. And you always can lean on the team. And especially if you're good at building a team, you're going to have great results. So that's also something that you can practically do from that perspective so that you don't have to be a subject matter expert at every domain. As a matter of fact, it's impossible anyway. Between me and Mike, gosh, how many years of networking experience we have and knowledge, and yet we still don't know it all. Not even a fraction of it. It's impossible. So just keep that in mind as well. You're not in it alone. Fola Shaki asks, do we need to focus on metrics such as equivalent annual cost and asset turnover as architects?
We will need to focus on them if they're related to the business. For example, inventory turnover is going to be absolutely critical for a retailer. Critical. But inventory turnover for a hospital isn't something they're trying to increase. So we need to understand the organization's business, and each business will have its effective key performance indicators. And we need to use them in the context of what they actually mean in the context of that business. You know, Falasaki, I actually learned a lot more about this when I was younger. When I learned to practice medicine, it really taught me a lot about these architecture concepts. And they used to say, treat the patient, not the lab. And what do they mean by that? They mean if someone comes in and they seem completely healthy, but a lab shows something's wrong, maybe retest the lab before you put them in the intensive care unit. Likewise, if someone looks terrible, but their labs are okay, maybe you still better put them in the intensive care unit because you know something that's going there. But every industry will have its own metrics, and that's the key. But if it's on a balance sheet, you probably need to know it. If it's in a financial statement, you need to know it. If it's going to affect the organization's ability, you need to know it. And let's look at the inventory turnover. For example, the goal of a retailer is to turn their inventory as fast as possible. If I buy something for $1 and sell it for $1.50, if I can do that 100 times a year versus 50 times a year, it's twice their revenue. But you know, in a real estate holding company that's basically going to buy and hold and collect rents, there isn't going to be no turnover like that. They don't want that. The less of it, the better. So we have to put it in context. But it's a great question. And yes, we will need to focus on business and real business metrics and real business values.
Yep. And especially if you're going to be an enterprise architect, you're going to be mostly working on the business side anyway. So those metrics are going to be paramount to your understanding. If you're more an architect that works on the technical side, let's say system design, software design, it may be less imperative for you to consider these things. But even at that stage, again, you're not going to be by yourself. You might have an enterprise architect above you that is leading you in designing these systems that you can lean on to get an understanding if needed. They may even come to you to gather some metrics to be able to calculate all these different this information so that it can be of some value to the business. Follow-up question by Fola Shaki. Are the topics covered in the ITIL certification pertinent to the architect's career?
So Fola Shaki, there is 0 certifications in the entire world that have anything related to architecture. You must understand business. You must understand leadership. You must have executive presence, sales skills, emotional intelligence. You must understand business processes and business process reengineering. You must understand networking, data center, security, cloud, all those things. None of that's in any of the certifications, but all of these things are frameworks which guide you once you're already trained on to be an architect, how to do it. So, you know, kind of keep that in the back of your mind. If I ever see an architect with 10 certifications, I won't even waste my time interviewing them. And here's the reason why. They're learning skills from somebody else's job. None of this is pertinent. I'm looking for people that really focus on business and really focus on making their clients successful and really focus on performance improvement and really focus on leadership. And here's the reason why. I can be one architect and great in tech, or I can be an architect that knows tech that can get 150 people that are great at tech to work for me to really help my client. One's a strong leader and develops billion-dollar architectures. The other one's career stalls and stalls quickly. So honestly, the only certifications that I've ever recommended and will ever recommend is the CCIE and CCDE for network architects, because they're great. They actually force you to know something. The CISSP for security architects, and it's not going to teach you security architecture, but it is a very respected certification that will help you get an interview, and it does cover things like risk and risk mitigation strategies. It's quite good. It's a very great certification. I will tell you that there's 0 architecture in the Azure Solutions Architect Expert, Google Professional Cloud Architect, or AWS Solution Architect Professional. It's all engineering, but I still recommend it, and here's the reason why. You pass one of those things, however silly way you do it, and that gets you an interview. And then as long as you've been training to be an architect, you'll get an architect job because it's not covered in there. And do I really like any other ones? Honestly, TOGAF. And why TOGAF? TOGAF, again, doesn't teach architecture, but it's a methodology used by a lot of big players. And for example, it's just a strategy that says in your architect, and you have to be trained as an architect first, start with the vision, then go to the business processes, then go to the data architectures, then go to the technology architecture, then find your governance strategy and opportunity solutions. That's all it is. It's just a step 1, step 2, step 3 to do the things that you have to be trained to do. But no, architects are, because it's such an executive position, there is no certification. Just like there's no certification to be a chief technology officer. There's no certification to be a chief information officer. There's no certification to be a chief executive officer. There's no certification to be a president. Or a vice president. It's once you get beyond a certain point, they're there. The certifications are for your lower level positions. They're still important. And when I lower level, I mean lower paid, less business oriented, not less important. Because it doesn't matter how good the architecture is if you don't have a team of great engineers to go build it in the back end.
You always need somebody to lay the foundations for something.
Yep.
I would add about the ITIL certification is if you've had never any exposure to business, you might be able to glean a little bit from it towards your path as to becoming an architect, because it does detail some practices in regards to how to, or the best practices to say, they're very detailed in regards to how to apply IT services to some of the business. The problem that you have there is that every business is very unique. So if you have something that is a detailed framework of anything, it's going to become a cumbersome, how would I put this? A hindrance to you to actually be able to apply it to other customers. So that's why something like a general framework of how to design a system, on how to say if you do implementation, operation, those are a lot better to go for because they're going to be more generic and they're going to allow you a lot more flexibility on how to actually apply it to the business itself. But like I said, if you have never had any exposure, there really isn't a manual out there. Maybe spend the weekend reading a little bit in regards to the ITIL book, but don't spend your time necessarily investing the money in obtaining it unless your employer requires it of you. So if there's a financial incentive, of course then, but otherwise don't do it. That by the way, that's for any certification. For any certification. I'm not just saying it for ITIL. I'm saying it for the CCIE, CCNP, AWS, whatever it is. There has to be some incentive, some return on your investment if you're going to do a certification.
Yeah, and here's the key. The average architect earns $1,000 a day, which means if people spend 6 months on a certification, that's basically 20,000 times 6, $120,000 of income they could have earned if they got hired faster. So for me, it's all about get the best skills, get the most critical skills, get in there and get hired, and then you can add what you need. Hope that answers your question. Good question, by the way.
Yep, fantastic. Rahul asks, what's more important for a cloud architect role? Having a high-level overview of the solution and services, or having in-depth knowledge of each component involved in the solution?
Well, technically neither. That's more of an engineering thought versus an architecture thought. So let me let you know what I mean. Here's the most important thing. Understanding the business and knowing how that solution will help the business. We are not engineers. They don't hire us for our technical expertise. We are there to optimize the business. So the most critical thing is understanding the business needs and then knowing how the solution will then optimize that business needs. That means when we choose technology, it will affect the way people work, those organizational processes. So before we even think about technology, we need to think about how technology will impact maybe the way the organization sells a product, services a product, the organizational supply chain. So that comes first. Then we have to think about the solution. Now, Rahul, we don't ever design the solution ourselves unless it's a mini architecture. We build a team. And what's going to be more important here is you're building the right team that has the deep knowledge of that solution so that you can then sell and present that high-level solution to the decision makers. Who's the decision maker? The CIO, the CEO, the CFO, the people that say yes. Now, along the way, we're going to have a lot of things where we need expertise. And I can promise you, even if you spent the rest of your life and more, you could still never learn in depth all these details that you would ever need to know to be really great for an architecture. Unless we live thousands of years, there's just not enough time. Between Mark and I, we've got 40 years of network architect experience. And guess what? That's only covering 40% of networking at best. There's still another 60%. So when it comes to architecture, when you understand those business requirements, you're going to quantify the opportunity of the architecture. What's the value to your organization should you be able to sell that? Then you're going to go build a team and you're going to justify to your organization why you need 50 people for the next 6 months, because they cost money. And then you're going to build a business case around that. Then in a real architecture, and especially if you're, and this is if you're learning to earn more. If you want to earn more, you're going to get closer to the business like I'm describing to you. The closer you are to the technology, the least you earn, which is really sad, but it's true. So then once you understand the team, now you're going to lead the team into creating the design. Then when we're done creating the design, we're going to document the design with the team. Maybe we're responding to an RFI, RFP, RFQ, that kind of thing along the way. Now we got to go present that design. So how do we present that design? You know, I go do my thing with the executives. I go do those things with the technical management. And now it's going to get geeky and it's going to get technically, because now we're dealing with software-defined networking, which is part of our solution. And I go, Mark, please give a presentation for me on software-defined networking. And a lot of what we do as architects is bringing in the right people. All these companies have subject matter experts for us, and we call them and bring them, and that's how we design the best solutions for our clients. So the answer to your question would be having the higher level overview of the solution. But you're already too many steps down. You're almost in the engineering world versus the architect world, almost, but not quite. So the high level knowledge of the solution, yes, but what does that solution do for the business? Over 50% of all cloud architectures are disastrous, and 70% of all technology projects are failed. And that's why organizations have moved to these more businessy and executive architects, because they're tired of spending money on technology-driven projects. They need to be business-driven projects. Great question, Roel. Please ask some more. I'm thrilled you're here.
Yeah, I'll add my 2 cents to it too, since I'm going to have to head out here a little bit. If we're talking about cloud architecture the way it is advertised currently in the marketplace, neither would really fit to you. Because on one end, if you want to pass the certification, you're going to have to know about each component. Why? Because you're going to have to perform the clickety-clack when it comes to the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll throw a little bit in there how a design looks like. And it's going to confuse you because your mindset is going to be different. So from a traditional viewpoint, so we'll just refer to that, from a traditional viewpoint, neither would really serve you well. But let's say you're going towards the definition of cloud architecture that we give, where it's more of a business role. If you have in-depth knowledge of the particular components, and this expands over the different cloud vendors, and you can still have a reasonable way of shifting your mindset towards just looking at it from a high level, then you can have both while still focusing on the business. But I'll be honest with you, unless you're ridiculously talented, you can learn really fast, whatever it may be, or you have tons of experience, going from a operations mindset, an engineering mindset, and then transitioning through those different levels is not easy. You will get there. There's different paths to the same end goal, but it won't be easy for you to do. But with effort, with time, and if you have the time, that's great, you can do both. But just know that it will take time if you're going to take that approach. And which is more important then from these for the actual architect? Neither really, unfortunately. Question from Simon. Architects from big brands focus on customer relationships and have a good reputation. How can architects not from these companies find their own advantages?
Simon, the same way. Yeah. So architecture, consulting, sales, it's all about your relationships and your reputation. So I've worked for companies that were dying. I worked at one company early in my career. I was there for the first 20 days, and on the 20th day, they announced a 30% layoff, and they did 13 layoffs when I was there. But I never got laid off. And I'll tell you why. A lot of that was based upon reputation and the way I treated others. But I'm using this small company because as a small company, how did I architect designs? I met with clients. I had conversations with them. I learned their needs. If they asked a question about our product and our product wasn't the right one, I said, this is not the right one for you. And when they asked what we could do well, I told them what we could do well. When we asked what we couldn't do well, I told them we couldn't do well. And as an architect, it doesn't matter where you work. We're born with one name. And how we treat that name affects our entire lives. If you work at a small company, treat people well. You work at a big company, treat people well. And at the end of the day, make sure that everybody knows Simon as a genuinely good person. A person that cares about their clients, a person that cares about their client's success, a person that will be there when the client needs it, a person that will respond to the client's needs. Even if they call you at 3 o'clock in the morning and they say, Mike, we're having an outage. I know you're not in tech support, but can you escalate it internally and get the right people here on time? And you show up with donuts or coffee, and then you feed everybody coffee and donuts while they're working on their problem while you're bringing in other people. It's all about how you treat people. You know, Simon, I can remember I was in the Middle East one time, and I was working for a Cisco competitor at the time. And Cisco is a great company. The competitor was a great company. And it was one of the first voice data and video projects in Dubai. And while I met with the client asked me, they said, Mike, is your switch the best one right now for this application? I took a deep breath. I said to the person, I said, honestly, it's not right now. I said, I got to tell you, the Cisco product's better. A year ago, you asked me this question. We had a better switch, but right now, Cisco has a better switch and better support on the switch. You know what the client said? Mike, I'm going to buy your switch anyway, because nobody else in the world would have told us that. Nobody would have cared, and nobody would have flown to the Middle East from where you're in New Jersey like 15 times in the last year. So we're going to buy from you anyway. We want your solution. So to me, it's all about name. It's all about reputation. It's all about treating others well and wonderfully. In a good company, it's a little easier because you got a corporate American Express card and they encourage you to spend money on your clients. Guess what? If somebody took me to a diner, well, I like diners, I'm Greek, and a lot of Greek people have diners, and my family had one, but they say they're there. If somebody took me for an omelet and a black coffee, I'd be thrilled. Or a green tea, I'd still be thrilled. I don't need to be taken to Morton's or Smith & Wollensky for a client to entertain me. I'm just happy for the time. I'm happy for the fact that they care. So just be yourself, be your authentic self, and always do right by your people.
Yeah, they do say that there's the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated. And then there's also the saying, if you help enough people get where they need to go, they will help you where you also will want to go. So I remember in my career, I've worked for different companies, and I always treated the customer like they were my customers, not the company's customer, but my customers. So I wanted them to trust me. For them to be able to trust me, for them to have some rapport with me, I needed to be unbiased. I needed to be truthful. And you know what? That sometimes meant not recommending necessarily the solution that I had available to be sold. It just was a reality. And thankfully, this never happened. But the thought did cross my mind is that it could mean my termination from the company. The company might not like that. I'm there to be able to promote our product. But my thinking was that it was better to build a relationship with the customer, to be honest with them. Let them truly know if this is something that they should invest in. Because don't forget, it's going to take years for them to recoup some of these investments that they make in any of these solutions. And thankfully, it turned out well for me. I built great relationships with the customers. They knew me apart from the company. And I got praised for that as well. And I was able to further assist them, perhaps with other solutions, in staying with the company. So make sure that you're unbiased, that you're ethical, and that you do show that you care about their success over perhaps the company's success if you work for a provider. And that way you will build a reputation. And within your company, if you have good leadership, they will actually appreciate that you have such ethics, that you care about the customer, that you go just beyond the customer relationship, that you provide true customer experience for them. So apply those principles, and hopefully that will help you in your career. Great question.
Yeah, and you know, there might be a second half of this that we didn't notice. How can architects find their own advantage? So let's talk about that. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. Take care, Mark. I know you've got.
Take care all.
But we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and I want you to think about some advantages you could have. Maybe you're a great leader. Maybe you can bring 50 people along with you when they follow you, and therefore you have some of the best teams in the world. Maybe you focus on being a better business expert and understanding business better and being able to help your clients better from a business perspective. Maybe you love networking so much that you want to get geeky in networking, and you pick a field of networking like internet service provider networking or enterprise networking, and you get geeky in that. Maybe you're a good mentor of others, and you build your name by mentoring others throughout the world. Maybe you give great presentations, so you go out there as an architect and give a lot more presentations, present at more conferences, and watch your management notice you and promote you. But the point is we're all different and we all have our own unique strengths. And one of the keys to being successful is to know yourself, know your strengths, and knowing your competition, and finding out how you can use your strengths. There's this thing going around, and it saddens me, where people say, don't compare yourself to others. Well, that sounds great in theory, right? But now you and another person go apply for a job, and then what the hiring manager is comparing you with the other person. So I kind of would like you to think about this. In The Art of War from Sun Tzu, which I definitely recommend reading, spelled TSU, they say, if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you need not fear the result of 1,000 battles. So know yourself. Know what you're so good at that you can be the best in the world at it or close to it. Know your competition and know what they're good at and what they're not good at. And then use your secret strength, that one thing that's so special about you, to go win. That's why I love military strategy books. They used to make everybody read The Art of War in an MBA program. It was great. They don't do it anymore, but hope that helps, Simon. And please ask more questions. Love to help you. Folashaki, is it normal for there to be one architect on a project? Not normally. It depends on the size of it. Look, if it's going to be a $200,000 project, yeah, that's going to be a single architect. Of course, that architect can ask others. If you're going to work on a 20 to 100 million or $1 billion architecture, it could be 30, 40, 50, 100 architects, and it can take a year to design it. So there really is no normal, but I want you to think about this. With the exception of people that work for, say, a cloud provider that are doing startup businesses or small businesses, anybody else that's going to employ an architect is going to be a big business. And there are lots and lots and lots of architects typically on a project. A bank hires multiple architects. A global retailer hires multiple architects. Anybody, for the most part, is going to need multiple architects. And here's the reason why. You can't know all domains. Like, I spent a lot of years as a network architect, and you know what I architected? Either ISP BGP solutions or IP multicast solutions. There are other architects that I know that do just software-defined networking. I know other architects that just do voice. I know other architects that only do video and networking. I know other architects that only do Wi-Fi. I know other architects that focus on 5G and 6G and nothing else. And what happens in these enterprise-grade projects is it's going to be covering this domain of things, and no one person can ever do it. So the key is not to try. There's the favorite saying in the world. It's the African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. Find a way to build the team. Find a way to get the greatest people from all over the world in your team. We've got video conferencing, and work with that team and design some pretty impressive things. That's truly the secret to these careers. Great question. Assuming you're relatively new to a company and another company offers you better compensation package, is it advisable to leave that company assuming an offer is obtained? It depends. So Falashaki, I want you to understand certain things from a hiring manager perspective. If somebody has 3 to 5 jobs inside of like 3 years, it's a signal to the hiring manager not to hire them. And many hiring managers won't. And here's what job hopping typically shows. But there's another side of this, which we'll get to too. Job hopping either shows the person quits, in which case you're going to spend 6 months to a year training the person, and they're going to quit and go to your competition, which is not something an employer wants. Or the person's not good enough in the job, and they get fired, laid off, or they leave before they get another one. So if you've got a lot of short-term jobs on your resume, it can be toxic. And I know a lot of people who've done that a lot, whose careers really suffered for a couple of years. Now, let's say you're new to a company, but you hate the job and you're going to be miserable. Then going to another company is advisable. And the other question is, we also have to look at your resume. If you were at your last job for 5 years and the job before that for 5 years, and now you have a new job and you've got a much better opportunity, well, now go take that other opportunity because it's not going to look bad. So we have to understand that. You know, there's two ways you can get ahead in your career, and I've done both. Initially in my career, I did just this. I took a job for MCI WorldCom. They paid me fairly well. And I left and got a job that paid me twice as much at night security 6 months later. And, you know, that was good, right? And this AI making all these things in the background, Apple, we've got to disable that. But, you know, there's that. But you know what happened in that new job that I had? I missed my old job because I liked it better. And you know what would happen if I stayed in my old job? I just would have gotten promoted and paid more. But I did that job hopping thing in the beginning until I realized it was going to affect my career because I had too many things on the resume. And then I found the job and I kept it. And then once I went to Cisco, I went in there. I took a job when I joined Cisco, which really wasn't the job that I wanted. But my wife didn't want me to travel across the globe 300,000 miles a year anymore. And I took a job at Cisco where I could work out of the New York City office. And I did that for a little while. And then I got promoted into a much better position and a much better position and a much better position. And they valued the loyalty of sticking around. And they gave me raises and stock grants to prove it. And I love Cisco, and it was the best job I ever had, and I spent a long time there. So you have to consider all things. Where you're at, what your resume looks like, how many jobs you've hopped in the past, what your actual goals are. Is the new job in your actual career versus the old job that wasn't. But I like to be pretty strategic with jobs and determine where they're going to go, where they're going to take me, and are they in line with my future vision. I don't just, it's more than just money, unless you're struggling. Good question. Tyrone, bring in the next one. And please, if you've got questions, ask them. Mohammed. Let me try to understand this before I read it. So if I understand your question, Mohammed, you're saying, what does the environment look like when the team distributes the work and the art between the architect and the leader? Well, here's the thing. In everyone, it's different. So let me tell you about the architecture that actually built my entire career. It was the one time in my life I knew absolutely zero about the technology that the architecture would be. So previously in my architecture career, I had known a lot about what I was architecting. In this particular case, there was one of the world's largest banks that had come to Cisco and said, we want an IP telephony solution for our organization. And it was a big IP telephony organization. It was a highly strategic one. And I went to my manager and said, I don't know IP telephony, voice over IP. And my manager says, so? And he said, you're a leader, right, Mike? And I said, yeah. He said, you can learn, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, do you have the ability to call anybody in this company? And I said, yeah. He said, have you spent the last 6 months building relationships with people in this company? And I said, yeah. He said, go design it. Now, this was the biggest architecture of my life. I remember John Chambers shaking my hand on stage at Cisco because it was a deal that they never thought could be done. So what did I do here? I went, okay, well, I don't know voice, but I know people that do. And I went to my manager and I said, I'm going to need about 15 people. And my manager said, sure, build a business case. I built a business case. I talked about the expected value of the opportunity in terms of revenue. I had gotten some information about the other potential qualitative benefits of this. I then sold this to the systems engineering manager, senior systems engineering manager, senior systems engineering director, VP. I got the VP of sales involved, and we got the right people. And then, we went in there, and I had a team. They weren't all in New York and New Jersey at the time. Some were spread throughout the world. And we would meet every single day in person and on WebEx. We would do our time together. We would do our time at work. And at the end of the day, I would collect information on designs, RFPs, RFQs. The team would give me all the information. I'd ask for the advisors to give me advice, and I designed it. And that was the one that really built my career because it was so strategic. And it was one where I actually didn't understand the technology. And that was terrifying to me, but that's why you use a distributed team. We have to use the team because in that particular case, I needed the team. But even if I didn't, when I would design systems for a hospital, and I would design lots of systems, and I'm an expert on health IT architectures, and I built my career in either medicine or that, but there's that, we're still going to get into the storage area networky thing, and I needed a storage area network person to come help out with it. We're going to get into that security thing, and sure, I've got plenty of security knowledge, but I don't have the security knowledge of somebody that does nothing other than just security because that's their life's work. At the same time, now we've got somebody that's going to be I had a QoS expert, quality of service, and spent their whole life with queuing and traffic policing and traffic shaping and prioritization of traffic, that kind of thing. And brought them in. Person had a PhD in the mathematics related to queuing. So it's kind of that. So the plan is that we become an architect, and then you ultimately are an executive. So you're the leader. So you're going to have to make a decision. And that means getting the input and guidance from everybody that you think is credible in there. Now, that's where you got to be really information is where you get your information. So, doctors and nurses are taught to go to peer-reviewed medical journals. Don't go to blogs. And they're taught to look at the credentials of the people that are teaching it. It's the exact opposite of Udemy. To be in one of these peer-reviewed journals, you have to know something. You have to know something. You got to be great, and you got to be credible and trusted. Udemy, somebody learned something yesterday, and all of a sudden they've got a course on it today. So, you kind of think about that. So you got to get the right information. You got to do the right research. You got to get the right advisors. And ultimately, you have to go make the right decisions. Fellow Shockey, why are directors required to have a certain number of years experience in order to obtain the role? Nobody's ever required to have a certain number of years experience. Everybody desires a certain number of years experience. So let's talk about the difference. I know people that have been a director inside of 1 year. I'm not joking. I know people that for 25 years haven't made it past manager 1, let alone senior manager or director. What people want to know is that you've got the ability to do the job and do it well. So on my first, manager role, here's what the manager questioned me about. They said, what's going to happen when you have to fire somebody? You've never done it before. And I said, what do you mean what's going to happen? I'll hate it just like every other manager hates it. But if I've got a problem, we have to protect the company. And, but the manager's like, but you haven't done it before. I'm like, well, yeah. And I said to that manager, I said, I never had a heart attack before, but I practiced medicine for years and I knew how to treat patients that had a heart attack. And he went, okay, you got a good point there. So it's not that people are looking for experience. What they're looking for is competency. And that's why you see people like Daniel Bosu, who was 20 years old, that was a high school dropout, that was a student of ours, getting hired by JP Morgan Chase because he was so good. And I've got somebody that came to me with 25 years of engineering experience that we have to still train for architecture. And, we'll get there, but it's a matter of training. It's a matter of being good at the job. And being good at one job doesn't make you good at another. So it's not really related to experience, but you've got to prove yourself and you've got to show leadership. And that's one of the things. You give me a 23-year-old and they've got so much executive presence that you don't know they're there. I'll put them in a director role. I sure will. But you've got somebody that doesn't have the executive presence and doesn't have the judgment and doesn't have the wisdom and doesn't have the leadership skills, then they're not going to be there. Now, organizations would always prefer more experience than less because that means you're known and a proven commodity, theoretically. But when it comes down to it, I know doctors that have been doctors for 6 months that are smart. I know doctors that have been doctors for 50 years that have killed people from the day they started their medical career, and 50 years later, they're worse than they used to be. I went to a physician the other day so that my wife and I didn't write my own prescriptions. And when I walked in, she looked 12 years old to me. And then I heard her speak and I was wowed. She was so good. She was so smart. And I really had a lot of respect for her. Tremendous. But that was based on how good she was. So that's the key. We're just generally looking for people that have been there and done it. But if you're able to prove that you can do it and you can show competency, you can be there too. And I've got lots of directors that I can prove to you that have very little experience that got there. And I know other people that have spent 20 and 30 years that haven't got there. It's about having the right skills, good leadership, good emotional intelligence, good executive presence, the ability to sell, the ability to ethically influence and persuade, the ability to bring out the best in others, the ability to find other strengths and bring them up while mitigating their weaknesses. They get people to play together as a team. Those are valuable skills anywhere. Good question. Freedom Lance, is it harder to do an interview in Zoom than in person? As most cloud architect interviews are through the internet? Well, I don't think so. And if it's a really good cloud architect interview, you're going to be flying in person. But there's different grades of these interviews. So when you're in person, it's easier to make an impact. And that's why big business deals are done in person. So keep that in the back of your mind. If you have the opportunity to fly there or do via Zoom, go fly there. Put on a great suit, polish your shoes, polish your belt, make sure your shirt and everything is clean and pressed and wrinkle-free, and go make that impact. If you're not, go ahead and do it. So now, Freedom Lands, I will tell you, early in my career, I couldn't make the same level of impact when I was on video versus when I was not. But I got training for it. I also early couldn't make as big of an impact when I was sitting versus when I was standing. So I got training like that. But here's the thing. Yeah, most of the things are going to be on the video, so get used to being on video. Every day when you're on video, turn your camera on. Adjust your camera so that you're looking at eye level on the camera or something close to it. Adjust the field of view, adjust the audio. So we have to remember when we're communicating with others, 55% of the communication is what we look like. 38% is what we sound like. And 7% is the actual word. So yeah, go there. I know I train our clients all on executive presence so that they can make an impact in person, on the phone, and live on video like Zoom or WebEx or Teams or Google, but you're going to have to do that. And let's talk about these interviews. You know, one or two of them might be a technical screener. One of them is going to be a management one. And the last interview is typically going to be a presentation. That's where your techies fail. When they have to give a presentation and they don't derive the right presentation. So is it harder? Is it easier? It all depends on you. I know some people that are more comfortable on Zoom, for example, than they actually would be in person. Kind of think about that. So I hope that kind of helps. Please, Freedom Lands, ask another question. I'd love to help you. And actually, all of you, I've got a few more minutes if you want to ask some questions. Simon, for architects, what are the fundamental marketing and sales skills that need to be established? Simon, we're not really in the marketing business. Companies have a marketing department that does marketing. Now, some of us architects actually design solutions. And what is marketing? It's creating the product or the solution, determining the price, determining the promotion strategy, and determining where you're going to put these things. So kind of keep about that. But marketing is not our world. Now, sales is. So let's really talk about what goes into sales. Solving someone's problem. And it's not the price. It's never the price. It's always the value. And this is where people go wrong. They try to sell on price. Businesses don't care price. They care value. If I sold you this pen for $10 and it did nothing for you other than write, this would be a highly expensive pen. But if I could sell you this pen for $1 million and this could help you sell 10 $1 million deals that year, this would be the most valuable, cheapest $1 million you've ever spent in your life. So kind of keep on that. We must understand in sales how we're helping our client. And we must be able to build a business case on it where we show the client how it's going to help their business. And our business case has to be real good. So if I'm going there and trying to say, here, I'm a cloud architect, I'm going to save you 20% on by using the cloud, they're going to laugh at me and kick me out of the office. Now, if I go in there and I can talk about the business agility provided by the cloud, for example, and how the cloud can enable them to start new applications and new services and new business options quicker. And I can quantify the difference between creating a new application in the cloud versus the private data center, and the revenues related to these new applications, and how these new applications getting done first to market have helped other organizations in similar situations improve their revenue by this while decreasing their marketing expense because they were first to market. Now I've got something that I can talk about that I can actually sell. So sales is learning your customers' needs. That means asking the right questions. It means learning your customers' pain points, meaning asking the right questions and doing research. It includes finding the client's goals, and that means asking more questions and research. Then it involves looking at the entire portfolio of options that you have that can assist them. Then it involves selecting the right portfolio of options, because every option we choose is going to help something but hurt something else. And whether it's sales or whether it's architecture, it's kind of a similar job. It's all about evaluating all the trade-offs of every business option and then finding the one that's best for the client. Then it's about going back to the customer, being able to present it to them, knowing how to sell, knowing how to ask the right questions, and then being able to negotiate the deal. Finally, bring that deal, and then potentially after you've negotiated the deal, then bring in the lawyers to go sign the contracts. Those are the kind of sales skills that are needed. Hope I answered your question, and please feel free to ask more. Freedom Lands, hi Mike, you're interested in the interview program. How often in a month are the practice interviews in the program? So, great question, Freedom Land. So, let me explain a little bit about the program. One of the reasons we created an interview program is when we have people that are really good, we want them to be the best interview. Now, in our architecture training program, we also have interview training. So let's keep that in the back of your mind. And for people that need the skills, we recommend the architect program, because that'll teach them the skills, because you have to have the skills to be hired for the interview. But let's talk about that interview program. We typically do for a 4-batch, very small, intimate group of less than 20 people. And we do a lot of private special interview training in that program. And we do it all in a month, once a week. And this is where we get to know the person. We ask them questions. We do practice questions. We do a lot of interviews. We do a lot of coaching, a lot of smoothing them out. We teach people how to highlight their strengths. We teach people how to mitigate their weaknesses. We teach people how to answer questions they don't know how to understand. We teach people how to better position themselves. We teach people how to sell themselves. And why are we so focused on these skills, Freedom Lands? What if I told you that in most technology positions, there's at least $100,000 different between the top and the bottom paid person on the team? And I can show you some examples if you'd like. Let me know if you'd like, and I'll show you some examples. A lot of that has to do with your sales skills, especially if you're in a role like architecture, which is related to sales, but a lot of it has to do with your interview. The better your interview, the more desirable you are, and the greater your offer will be. And that's the secret. The more desirable you are, the more you will earn. So we do 4 private coaching sessions in that interview program, and it's small and it's intimate, and we get deep. And then we do a monthly coaching session once a month for 6 months. And this is supported by an incredible amount of interview content that's inside of there, interview instructions, things for you to practice on your own, teaching you how to position yourself to the hiring manager so they see you as everything they want, whether you lack experience or not. And the results of this program have been pretty darn extraordinary. I think the first person that got hired out of the program took a solution architect job. He was selling perfume. His name was Raymond. Really great guy. He took that interview skills. He took it with his natural sales skills. And poof, he went out there and he got himself a great job. But we also trained him to be an architect as well. But we've got a lot of people doing both. It's an incredible program, Freedom Lands. I'd love to see you in class. I know we're taking applications for a new batch right now. And I actually have an interview class to teach tonight. And I'm all excited about it because I love teaching and I love working with it and watching the students present something and then coaching them and adding the presence and making them stronger. And I'm excited to do it tonight. It's always fun for me. Does anyone else have any questions for me? Because I really would love to help you build your career. If you've got some questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes. If not, I will get back to my day. Back to content creation, back to curriculum development, back to speaking to the press and all those other things that I do and write articles for magazines, etc. So I'll give you a chance to ask your questions. While I wait to see if you have any last questions, I'd like you to join me tomorrow on the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. We will go over the cloud architect role. We will go over the things that hiring managers desire. We will teach you how to bypass HR so you don't get auto-rejected. And we will cover every single skill that you need to know to be a competent, capable, world-class cloud architect. And it'll be live on Zoom. So if you want us to interview you, we can. You want to have a conversation with you, we can. You want us to assess your knowledge, we can. And we do that all the time, and it's completely free. On top of that, we have a document that you could read now in preparation for that if you desire, on how to get your first cloud architect job. Tyrone, pop that into the chat box. And, you know, we're celebrating our anniversary. We had 8 people get hired in the last 7 days, which we're all excited about. Some of the people's first architect jobs is their first tech job. And we have a 50% off anniversary sale. The coupon code is anniversary50, and it's across all products and services that we have. So take advantage of that now. I look forward to seeing you all on the webinar tomorrow, and have a wonderful day. Take care, everyone.